rien n'est plus républicain.
Hello and welcome to Unscripted. I'm Commentator. Our guest for today's program is James Patrick Anthony Dore, or Jimmy Dore. He's an American stand-up comedian, a political commentator, a podcaster, and YouTube personality. He's the host of the Jimmy Dore Show, which is a comedic political talk show, and he's been vocal about a number of world events that has drawn attention to it, one of them being the genocide that has taken place against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, which we are now marking its 2-year anniversary, the Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. Jimmy Dore, welcome to Unscripted.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. We really do appreciate you joining us in this program. And today, as I'm sure you're well aware, is the 2-year anniversary of this genocide that's been so brutal. I can't believe it's 2 years. I'm sure you're also of the same thought. We're looking at a really tragic page of humankind's history for this to have taken place. One of the things that stands out amongst many shocking figures is the fact that you have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that may have been killed. The official figure runs around 60+ thousand. And one of the reasons behind this brutal campaign that's led to these deaths are the U.S. ammunition, in particular the MK-84 2,000-pound bombs. Now, I don't want to get too grotesque here, but these bombs are meant to destroy buildings. And according to the UN, it ruptures lungs, it tears limbs apart. Just one of the gruesome contributory factors that has led to this genocide. What are your thoughts about that? And, of course, the fact that we're looking at 2 years now.
Well, my thoughts are that the silver lining is that the world is getting to see exactly what Zionism is about. Zionism is about the greater Israel project, and not most people in America, including myself, didn't have any idea what that was until this genocide started. And I didn't even really know the real history of the Nakba or the Balfour Declaration. And so the more people learn about what Zionism really is and what the greater Israel project is and the kind of psychopath that Benjamin Netanyahu actually is, and the kind of culture that is inside of Israel, the death cult, the genocide cult, I think the better. And it gets it. So now the United States, the majority of Americans no longer stand with Israel. And a lot of people think that had something to do with Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk also turned against Israel. We've just been, Candace Owens just revealed that 48 hours before his assassination, that he had texted people in his organization saying he could no longer support the Israel project. And then 48 hours later, he was assassinated. And we know Israel has a long history of assassinating people, also of doing false flags. Benjamin Netanyahu is now saying that Iran is getting ready to send nuclear bombs to the east coast of the United States, which what that tells me is that Israel is getting ready to plant a false flag inside the United States. And so people, everybody has kind of woken up to what this greater Israel project is, what the problem is with Israel. And the real problem is, the only reason they're able to carry this out is, as you said, the United States keeps providing them arms and money. They provided them somewhere near $30 billion worth since October 7th, 2 years ago. So the good news is that lots of people, I think, will forever carry this image of Israel as being a warmongering terrorist state, a genocidal state that doesn't deserve our support. So that's, indeed. I guess, I'm just trying to find a silver lining. There it is.
Well, when you start talking about this, Jimmy, what really, in a way, surprises me is the fact that you said that you weren't aware of some of the brutalities that the Israeli regime has carried out. And in a sense, you were woken up by the extreme aggression exerted against the Palestinians through this genocide. But this has been going on for quite some time, decades in the making. It has been complete violations of human rights of the Palestinians, and also different wars that Israel has executed against the Palestinians. I'm curious as to know if you say that, then many Americans also felt the same way as to why that lack of information was out there until, for many, when this genocide actually began 2 years ago.
Well, I just don't think it was high on the list of Americans' interest, right? So before October 7th, I had covered on my show, I'd had a public radio show here in America for years, and I had covered certain atrocities by Israel committed against the Palestinians, but I never really got into the history of it because it just wasn't in our top 10 most important issues. But now it has. Now it has jumped up into the top 10 issues for most Americans because we're complicit in this genocide because it's our funding that's making it happen and our politicians. And people thought when they voted for Donald Trump that he was going to have magical powers and be able to end this. And in fact, he could. He could end this at the snap of a finger. All he had to do was stop funding this genocide and it would be over. And if Israel loses our funding, it is over for them. So most people, it just wasn't on the front burner for them, so to speak. It wasn't of utmost importance, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but now it is because it's an all-out, full-blown genocide 2 years and ongoing. And it's being, and because of social media now, people get a front row seat to view it, and it's horrifying people.
You had in one of the podcasts, the reference that you made, which was described as a critique of Israeli leadership, and you pretty much had it out with Itamar Ben-Gvir and, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, which you held responsible for the bombing and the starvation of Gaza. What I find interesting in there is the way that you described Itamar Ben-Gvir as being the face of evil. But, this clip that you played that said, Ben-Gvir said, I think that at this stage, the only thing that you should be sending to Gaza is shells to bomb, to conquer, and to encourage immigration. And then you said the other term for that is ethnic cleansing. That's interesting that you chose that, because this is what's been going on in Gaza. But now we're looking at this outward relaying of this type of sentiment. Why is it that the U.S. President Donald Trump, do you think it's backing this whole thing? Figures like Itamar Ben-Gvir, or do you think that he's sincere when he wants there to be peace there?
I'm not a mind reader. I would like to. I mean, everybody thought that Donald Trump wanted peace there. I'm sure he does, because this is nothing but a headache for him politically. This doesn't help him whatsoever. It just shines more light on the Epstein files, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with that saga that's happening, that scandal that's happening in the United States. Okay, so all this does is it won't let that scandal go away. And a lot of people think the reason why they're not releasing that, and the reason why Donald Trump is going along with Ben-Gvir and the face of evil and Benjamin Netanyahu, is that they actually control him because they have compromise, they have blackmail on him, and if not him, other his donors, his political donors, which is the people who really pull the strings inside the United States, is the billionaire class and the donors. And so it's bad for him politically, and I'm sure he would want this to end. I'm sure he didn't want this to happen. And in fact, most recently, the quote unquote peace deal that they came up with, most recent, and insiders have reported that Donald Trump has yelled at Benjamin Netanyahu just to take the deal, and that he doesn't know what's wrong with him. And I know what's wrong with him, so it's kind of curious to me that Donald Trump wouldn't know what's wrong with Benjamin Netanyahu. What's wrong with Benjamin Netanyahu is he doesn't want peace. The peace is the last thing he wants. What he wants is complete control and takeover and ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the West Bank and more. That Donald Trump is controlled by Benjamin Netanyahu, and Benjamin Netanyahu is the boss.
Right.
And Donald Trump is not, because Donald Trump could easily become the boss of Benjamin Netanyahu by cutting off funding, but he won't. So that places Benjamin Netanyahu in the driver's seat. And so now he's the one controlling whatever happens there, not Donald Trump, not Tony Blair, not anybody else. except Benjamin Netanyahu and his psychopathic group of genociders.
Well, when it comes down to it, there are different ways of looking at this. We are looking at decades also of not only the extreme violation of Palestinian rights, but also of negotiations. We know, I'm sure you're well aware at least, that the U.S. has been a mediator of the talks, the peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. Now, this most recent peace plan that you talked about, which is the 20-point one that Trump has presented, there are many things in there, many provisions that constitute this not working, for it not to be successful. One of them is the Hamas giving up all its weapons. Now, of course, those are points for negotiation. Hamas at this point has not agreed to that. The other one is Palestinian statehood. That's something that Benjamin Netanyahu is completely against. We know that, and I'm sure you're well aware of that also. So some say this is just Trump's way of saying, you see, we presented a deal, and they're not going for it. But the verdict is not out yet. I want to talk about the money factor here, and that is about how you have said, and it's public knowledge, U.S. supporting Israel. Everybody knows that, to the tune of billions of dollars a year, roughly around $4. But the issue is much more than just that, because when you take a look at what's happened in the past 2 years, it has been the U.S. states in America, the last count, 17 states and 9 counties that have purchased these high-risk Israeli bonds. Florida being one at the top of the list, right, of $1.5 billion. Then you have New York, $267 million, Ohio, Arkansas, Illinois, all in the hundreds of millions of dollars or less going down the list. These are states that have actually went ahead and have purchased bonds. That's another addition of the funding that is coming through. I'm curious as to why, in your opinion, the U.S. supports Israel as much as it does, even though there have been threats by previous U.S. presidents at one point or another, even Trump at one point saying that this funding, or Biden, I should say, the former president saying at some point this funding may be jeopardized.
Well, there's a Israeli lobby in the United States called AIPAC, and so they have money to spread around to politicians. So when you say why the American support, it's not American people's support, it's the politicians' support, because the politicians fear AIPAC, because not only does AIPAC give politicians money so they can run for office and keep their power, but if the politician doesn't take the money from AIPAC and doesn't go along and do what AIPAC wants, the Israeli lobby, then they will overly fund a challenger to them in the next election. We've seen that happen over and over again. And then AIPAC brags about that they have complete control over our politicians, and they win elections because they can pour as much money as they want into an election. And money wins elections in the United States. That's a big flaw of our system. And so they've exploited that flaw, and they take the money, AIPAC does, and they either give it to a politician to buy his complicity, or they give it to a challenger to unseat that person who doesn't go along with AIPAC. So that's why that's happening. That's why you have states buying bonds, these high risk bonds to fund Israel. That's what that is.
You mentioned Iran and how Netanyahu is spreading again some false facts, how you described, and that's accurate. And I saw a soundbite of Netanyahu that said that Iran has missiles that's going to reach the east coast of the U.S. He's trying to paint another, as you mentioned, perhaps a false flag. Now, when we take a look at Iran, you have been of the conviction that it's false intelligence that is provided by Israel and Mossad in particular. For example, when it comes to I guess, Iran developing ballistic missiles, nuclear weapons that have ballistic missiles as a capability in terms of its warhead. And Tulsi Gabbard is something that is a person you mentioned in terms of the intel, that she had said that Iran is not after nuclear weapons. Even you said in one of your podcasts or shows that Iran's leader is not of the conviction, nor is he of any type of advocation of nuclear weapons. It's a fatwa, as we say, that he has issued on that. If Trump knows that, why did he turn around then and discredit Gabbard's statement when she did say that Iran was not after nuclear weapons?
Because Donald Trump has a boss, and that boss is his donors, the Zionist donors, and his boss is Benjamin Netanyahu, and they wanted him to say that. That's why. That's why he keeps funding this genocide. That's why he bombs, Yemen. When he said when he was a candidate that when Joe Biden was doing the bidding of the Zionists and bombing Yemen, he said he didn't need to do that. That you could end this with a phone call. Of course, he becomes president. He immediately starts bombing Yemen at the behest of Israel and the Zionists. Same thing when he bombed Iran at the behest of Israel and the Zionists. And so that's why.
Okay,
'Cause he has a boss. He's not his own man.
Well, the thing that's very worrisome here is obviously following Netanyahu somewhat blindly, if that is something that Trump is doing, which hopefully it's not. I can't help but think when he was in Scotland just a month ago, he said that me and Netanyahu are going to shape the world, and that's pretty intimidating in terms of how those two minds can go ahead and do that. We have seen signs of that coming from the U.S. president. Let's talk about Charlie Kirk. Jimmy, Charlie Kirk is somewhat of a turning point, at least from our end, looking at things inside the U.S. in terms of the assassination, in terms of what he represented, in terms of the association that is made to Israel in one form or another, maybe indirectly that there was some kind of foul play there, and maybe there was this hand that Israel had in this. What is going on there with Charlie Kirk, the assassination, and what he represented, which is described as one of the biggest youth movements that existed in the U.S.?
Well, he's very powerful. He had, as far as electoral politics goes, he had chapters of his organization, Turning Points USA, all over and in colleges all over the country. And lots of people predicted that he would be president soon. So you can't be he was only 30 or 31 years old. You can't be president until you're 35 in the United States. But people had predicted that, and that's the kind of power he had. And he is the organization of Turning Points. I don't think it's going to really survive in the same way it was without him. So Charlie Kirk was very powerful, and of course, the story of the assassination that the federal government, the FBI, is pushing is completely ridiculous, and everyone sees it. And the head of the FBI, Kash Patel, is one of the worst liars I've ever seen in my life. You can tell he's lying when he's lying, and that's a bad liar. And
what gives it away?
He looks guilty as all. Say it again.
What gives it away when you say that it's obvious that he's lying?
Just his face. When someone he's got the most guilty look on his face. His voice, the timbre in his voice, and all that. You can just tell he's lying, and everybody knows. And plus, the story he's pushing, nobody believes. It's nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. They're not asking the obvious questions. There's so many things that don't add up. The fact that there was no exit wound. If he was shot by a 30-06, the rifle they said that shot him, it would have blown his head clean off. It wouldn't have made a little hole in his neck and then not have an exit wound. They're saying it was a miracle bullet, or no, they say it's a miracle bullet, and that Charlie's spine was like Superman, and it was able to stop that high caliber of a bullet. Like, that's not real. So that's again, and they're not. And then they claim they had text messages from the shooter, which he admitted to doing it with his lover. He admitted to doing the killing and being MAGA and all this other stuff. And it was written in a way that a 22-year-old kid would not speak, and it was not in the language. So that was completely false. That was transparently made up by the FBI to try to make everybody think it was this kid, a lone nut, a lone shooter. And the beauty of if it was that kid and he was in love with a trans woman, that adds to and he was on the left, so the left-right divide in the United States politically, that would then split, because the left and the right have been coming together to oppose Israel and the policies of Israel and the United States supporting Israel and their genocide. So the left and the right were coming together in that, and Charlie Kirk was the final nail in the coffin for Israel. And 48 Hours, Candace Owen had just revealed that 48 hours before his assassination, he had texted people inside his organization telling them that he could no longer support Israel, which meant the complete coming together of the left and the right. And so they had to set up this assassination in a way that split the left and the right again. And so that's what, if you believe the FBI's narrative about the Charlie Kirk assassination, that would pit the left and the right against each other again. That would make the right think it was leftist violence who killed Charlie Kirk, and they tried to put some trans person in the middle of this. And if so that would work out perfectly for Israel and their narrative, but no one's buying it.
Well, this is very dangerous for the U.S. to have what you say in terms of what has happened here. And when we talk about the left and the right coming together, it seems like Israel or Israel-related officials, whoever, maybe the Mossad also included in there, and I'm just speculating here because there's so many stories that are associating Israel in this one form or another, that they saw how the name of the organization, from what I understand, is TPUSA, correct? The MAGA movement.
Yeah, it stands for Turning Point.
Exactly. So I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Israel saw this as being such an effective organization because you have field representatives at 50 universities and high schools across the U.S., and he was very effective in his communication. But then, as you said, he turned somewhat against Israel. Do you think that Israel saw that as a danger sign then, if it's true that Israel was somewhat involved in this in one form or another?
Do I think that, first of all, yes, I think Israel saw that as a big threat. That's why a lot of people are speculating that they were the ones who had a big hand in this assassination. And immediately after his assassination, Charlie Kirk has a podcast that he hosted. And immediately after, the biggest Zionist shill in America, why am I blanking on his name now? Ben Shapiro was the guest host of his show. So it was the signal that the Israeli First Americans had taken over. So Israel had control again of Turning Point USA or TPUSA. That was a big signal, like, don't worry, we got it. And we're going to steer these young conservatives back towards Israel, because they had turned against Israel also. They just had a big meeting in Florida, Turning Points. They have it every year. And Charlie Kirk brought on Israel critics. And when they criticized what Israel's doing with Gaza, the crowd cheered. And when and Tucker Carlson said we shouldn't be supporting them, the crowd cheered. So they definitely saw that as a threat. And so it makes all the sense in the world why they would want to assassinate them, considering that that's their modus operandi in every situation. Who can they assassinate? They have a long history of assassinations, and they don't care if they assassinate Charlie Kirk, because it would help further their cause. And they could not afford to have the next generation of conservatives in the United States turn against Israel, which is exactly what has happened. And Charlie Kirk was leading that parade. So yeah, both those things, yes.
Well, there's a lot going on in the U.S., but unfortunately, the short amount of time that we have with you, Jimmy, is hard to cover the grounds. But I'd like to get your opinion on what's happening in Chicago, Illinois. You're from Chicago, from what I understand, correct?
Yes, correct.
Now, you have this war zone that's been described from what Trump has authorized, and that's the use of the National Guard inside U.S. cities. I'm reading some descriptions here of how apartments are being stormed by helicopters, while families are asleep. Chemical agents being used near public schools, handcuffing a Chicago City Council member at a hospital, just some of the incidents that are happening there. What are your thoughts about the way that the U.S. president has authorized the National Guard to be used inside the U.S.? And I just cited Chicago since that's where you're from.
Well, it's a very complicated story. I think most Americans are for legal immigration and they're against illegal immigration, and they would back someone trying to deport illegal immigrants, people who are here illegally. I think people would support that. I think the way Donald Trump is doing it is way over the top, and it's frightening people. A lot of people, it's frightening because he's using such an over-the-top military presence inside cities. It looks like they're in a war zone when they're actually in a very peaceful city on clean streets. But the problem is that the politicians are the ones who set this up. The politicians would take illegal immigrants and they would ship them to poor black neighborhoods in Chicago, and those neighborhoods had never gotten money from the government to invest in their communities, right? In fact, they were doing the opposite. The government of Chicago was shutting down public school buildings. They were shutting down public schools inside these black neighborhoods that are economically stressed, and they wouldn't invest in them. But when they would ship these illegal immigrants to these poor black neighborhoods, they would then house them in these, put them up in these schools, and then they spent $700 million to take care of these illegal immigrants inside these the public schools and other residences. And the people of those neighborhoods saw this. They're like, hey, we've been paying our taxes for my whole life, and you never invested in our community, but now there's illegal immigrants here, and now you find $700 million to give to illegal immigrants? Why don't you give $700 million to our own citizens, our own communities? And so they welcome, a lot of them welcome ICE, welcome the presence of Donald Trump trying to rid their neighborhoods of these illegal immigrants, and they're angry at their own politicians. The mayor of Chicago, I've never even heard of a approval rating so low, hit 6.6% approval rating for a black mayor in Chicago. I've never even didn't know that something like that was possible. And so that's why a lot of them are welcoming Donald Trump's, of ICE agents in to rid their cities, to rid their city of illegal immigrants. So it's a mixed bag. A lot of people are, it's frightening. Of course, it's the way he's doing it. It's almost if he intentionally wants to enrage his political enemies or the people on the left or the Democrats. He wants to make them frightened. He wants to make them afraid. He wants to enrage them. And I think that's a mistake. I think that's a real mistake. I think he should work with them. And because I think most, like I said before, I thought certainly the citizens of Chicago are on board for legal immigration, but they're not on board for illegal immigration. And I'm sure they would be willing to work with Donald Trump on that. But Donald Trump does it in such an over-the-top authoritarian way that it frightens people.
Sure. Well, the last question that I have for you has to deal with what you stated in the beginning of the program, and that is about this Greater Israel Project, which I have in my notes here. This Greater Israel Project is obviously a concern for the countries in this region. And the way that this looks is that it seems like Netanyahu has Donald Trump's backing. I'd like to get your sense on that, if that is really the case, because it involves a number of nations. You know, we're looking at Lebanon, Syria, we're looking at Saudi Arabia, we're looking at Egypt, Iraq, parts of Jordan, and it comes all the way to the western side of Iran. Iran is not part of that, but Iran is involved in their scheme or in their plans. They have it on their radars as a country to be targeted, not for the greater nation, Greater Israel Project, but for a country that they seem to think is trying to weaponize its nuclear program. What are your thoughts on this? Because this is very dangerous, and so far a lot of people, aside from the genocide in the Gaza Strip, have been killed because of it.
Well, you know, I've said on my show many times, the terrorists are the United States and Israel, and it's proven, you know, like a lot of people also speculate that Al-Qaeda and ISIS, if not completely invented by Israel and the United States, have certainly been supported. We know for a fact they've been supported by the United States, monetarily. And right now, they used to have a bounty out on the head of the guy who's running Syria because he was the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria. That a $10 million bounty on him from the U.S. State Department. And now the United States welcomes him. The head of the CIA, the former head of the CIA, and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, welcomes the former head of Al-Qaeda in Syria, who's now running Syria, into the United States, while we still have Guantanamo Bay open in Cuba, which is supposed to be, we're supposed to be fighting Al-Qaeda.
How crazy is all that?
Pardon me?
How crazy is all of that?
That's the craziest thing. And again, that never gets talked about on television, right? Because the television is also controlled by big money interests and big billionaire donors and the military industrial complex. The media is always pro-war and they're always pro-Pentagon. Whatever the war machine wants, they go along with. And the war machine wanted to overthrow Assad and install a puppet. And that puppet is now running Syria. He happens to be a former head of Al-Qaeda. And it is the craziest thing that we all the bombings that we do around the world, by the way, are because we have a thing called the AUMF, which is the Authorization for the Use of Military Force. which the Congress gave to the president after 9/11 to go fight terrorism anywhere in the world. So basically, it's a blank check for the president to go bomb any country he wants. All he has to do is say, I'm fighting Al Qaeda, I'm fighting terrorism. And so that's the blank check that so now the Congress doesn't have to declare war, and the president can just at his whim bomb anywhere he wants, which is what they've done. They bombed in Syria, they bombed in the Sudan, they bombed in Somalia, the Yemen, and it's not stopping.
Iran.
So and Iran, of course, yes. And so so it's the craziest thing to see us welcome the people who the Pentagon and our politicians and our government tells us attacked us on 9/11, and now they're sitting around shaking hands, smiling with him because he took off his terrorist garb and he put on a blue suit with a tie and he cut his beard, and now they love him. And so, by the way, he's also in bed with Israel, right? It's so funny. People don't ever, because this question never is allowed to be asked on American media, is, well, if ISIS and Al Qaeda are such enemies and they hate the Jews so much, why don't they ever attack Israel? It's just, and it's why, because they're working together and they're a puppet. That the head of I think his name is Gilani, right? The head of Syria right now is a puppet of Benjamin Netanyahu. He wants to be in business with Benjamin Netanyahu. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the Greater Israel Project, involves them taking control of at least a third of Syria. Indeed. And so they've got it. And he's not fighting. He's not the head of Syria. The president of Syria is not fighting against Israel, taking the land in his country, because he's working with them. It's all a big terrorist cabal of the United States, Israel, and Syria.
Indeed. Well, Jimmy Dore, we're fresh out of time. Thank you so much for joining us in this program. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Good luck.
Yes, thank you. You too. Thank you so much. You just listened to Jimmy Dore there. He is an American stand-up comedian. He has his own show, The Jimmy Dore Show. Do check it out. And he obviously had a lot of knowledge about what's going on. But what was quite interesting was how he spoke about the awakening that took place based on the Gaza genocide executed by the Israeli regime backed by the U.S. For a repeat of the program, do join us or do log on to the website, allthews.presstv.ir. From me, Cover Tagway, and the team here at Unscripted is goodbye.
Glossy fine. Rien n'est plus républicain. Please,